Elevate your mind. Elevate your mind. Elevate your mind. Elevate your mind. You can do it, you can do it, you can do it, you can do it, you can be it, you can be it, you can be it. You can do it, you can do it, you can do it, you can do it, you can be it, you can be it, you can be it. Elevate your mind. Elevate your mind. Elevate your mind. Elevate your mind. It's the high-end theory. The high-end theory. It's the high-end theory. The high-end theory. I remember when I told myself I'ma do this one day. One day. Held on to my dreams really tight and never let them escape.
Hello, Facts family. It's time to expand your mental universe with another Converse. Converse is a place where a fascinating guest and myself, Mo Facts, fall back and let the conversation shine. So now that Dani Katz is here, we can converse. How you doing, Dani?
I'm great, Mo. Thanks for having me. How are you?
Oh, it's always a pleasure to have you. Oh, I was so looking forward to this for so long.
Me too.
Yeah. So I guess just to let people know we're doing a little bit of revamp with the format here. The way it's going to go, of course, we have a conversation, a closed conversation with the guest, and then we open it up for the Facts family to ask questions. And then we do that a couple of times, and then we'll be out of here. With that said, just to let you know, and we're going to keep this time based so we don't take too much of the guest time, valuable time. But with that said, Miss Dani Katz, and the topic of the day is it time to walk away? You can find her website here. Let me put that link in the live chat so they can find your website. And while I'm doing that, Dani, you want to tell them anything about interesting about your website?
I mean, I recommend poking around my websites because I do so many things. So at danikatz.com, you can find my writing archives from my time as a journalist. Most of my articles have been censored, pulled off the web, disappeared, canceled, but you can find a bunch of them on that site. You can find my books. And yeah, I would just say just jump onto my websites and poke around and dig in.
And I also have your bio link.bio here as well, so they can also find more of your interesting things that they have,
yes,
including
we were both deleted from Linktree at the same time.
Yes, we were, and I'm still don't know the reasoning behind that. Nobody really gave me an explanation. I don't know. I don't think we were misusing it because I still see people asking for donations via that platform. So I don't know. So just a quick reminder to the Facts family. She's the author of Word Up. And also, I'm holding here in my hand an autographed copy of Pop Propaganda, an illustrated guide, written and illustrated by Dani Katz. So I appreciate that very much. I have made it about halfway through the book, but I'll have to invite you back to go over the completion of the work that you've done there. But before we move on any further, what I would like to do is wish you a happy belated birthday.
Aw, thanks, Mo. Thank you.
Excuse me, solar return, as you say it. And that was on the 21st, correct?
Yes, the 21st.
Yes. So if the Facts family could please give Dani a big happy birthday in the live chat. Belated, of course, but it's better late than never. And that's kind of why we had to readjust the schedule that we originally had. And I would like to also do this right quick. Acknowledge Mr. Don Oliver Davis, another guest and Facts family member. I had to slide his time back to accommodate, and he also is helping me with reformatting the show and with script writing for the show, so we have a little bit more continuity. So thanks, Don, for that. Appreciate all your help on that. Hopefully, I'll see him in the live chat soon. But I wish you your happy birthday. And I guess we can go into the first block. And what this is a couple of your interesting post on Instagram, which if you're not following her, please go follow her on Instagram. She's a very interesting follow. And that's kind of how this conversation originated. Uh, so for one of your posts, but they have to wait. They'll have to wait to get to that part. We have to get through some of these posts that you have. And with that said, let's go ahead and get into the first post. And your first post that struck me was, and this is what you're going to find in the pop propaganda, correct? These
Yes.
are the kind of things that you'll find in pop propaganda. And you can find that, I believe, on Instagram. If you look around, you can go to her website as well as her bio link. So, knowledge makes a man unfit to be a slave. You want to start there?
Yes, I'm happy to start there.
Well, take it away.
Well, I think it's a lot of what we're seeing right now is the people who are enslaving themselves to the narrative, to the mandates, to the tyrannical measures. It doesn't seem like they have all of the knowledge. And this is where the co-opting of the media really comes in and is wreaking havoc on our democracy, because we don't all have the same knowledge. And then we waste our time fighting about like whose talking heads know more, instead of, diving in to do our own research or having the research readily available to us. And so like, I really don't believe in the us-them divides. It's so polarizing and it's not helpful. And I do my best to honor everyone else's opinions and perspectives. And yet I've come to the place where not all opinions and perspectives are created equal when we don't all have access to the knowledge.
And it's funny that you say that. It's a couple things you say. I want to point out that I agree that I don't believe in the binary thinking. It's us against them. Because the divide they've done with this whole recent event is the anti-Vaseline, and that's what we call it around here on YouTube, but on the channel, but it's anti-Vaseline versus pro-Vaseline. And really the divide, I would think, would be more of is anti-choice versus pro-choice, because you can have people that have decided, one way or the other with the Vaseline, but they can be on the pro-choice side, and vice versa. You can have people that that may be on the anti-choice side, that haven't taken it. So I think framing the conversation or the debate in the right way will, make for a better conversation. And as you said off air, if people haven't known about it, I have been separated from my job, aka fired, for not taking the Vaseline into my life. And it's part of doing the research, right? Once you do the research, it's a hard decision to make. Would you like to pick up from that point?
Yes, I agree with you. Like, we can't unknow what we know. So, I've read Neil Z. Miller's 3 books on Vaselines. I can't erase that knowledge from my brain. I'm too educated at this point. And in terms of whittling, more complex arguments down to these polarizing binaries, that's the whole, that's the trick. That's the go-to technique of the powers that were, or the social engineers. It's to distract us from talking about what's actually really going on and to pit us against one another. So, I first saw this particular technique to this extent, right, to this degree of volume happen when Trump was elected. And then all of a sudden, if you didn't hate him, you were a white supremacist. You were an alt-right Nazi. That was my experience. That was what I was called. And I was like, I didn't even vote. Like, you can't put me in these categories. And people get really uncomfortable with that. And that's what's going on right now with the Vaseline, which is so silly when it is about, my body, my choice, which works really well when we're talking about baby murder. Mm-hmm. But apparently, gets really twisted when we're talking about forced penetration. And it's crazy because there are plenty of people, like Ben Shapiro, who has welcomed the Vaseline into his life, and it's still pro-choice, which is such a sane, and fundamentally American perspective. But they've created this as a propaganda mechanism and as a distraction to get us fighting over something silly. Like, if someone wants to take the Vaseline into their life, Godspeed. I'm for freedom. You know, if that's what someone wants to do, I would think it would be great if they had access to the real information about it. You know, if there were, if the ingredients were being included in the inserts and there was some honesty there. But I don't take a pro or anti stance on anything. So that whole conversation is so silly to me, but it has certainly taken over.
And just to add on to the point, all the points that you made, and to go back to the slide, you said knowledge makes a man unfit to be a slave, and that's quoting Frederick Douglass, of course. But you hear when you say, "I've done the research," or "I sought out alternate avenues of information or sources of information," the disdain that they have for you is amazing. It's amazing that we have this culture of inclusion, except for when you have an open mind to access non-mainstream sources of media. That's when the disdain comes. And then the leverage, and this is going to move us into the next slide, but the leverage that they used on you, if their side is so great, then why do you have to use coercion? Excuse me. It's like either you do what we say do, or we're going to cut you off from your means of making money. And that's going to take us into the next slide, because if you decide to make a choice for yourself, it puts a lot of responsibility on your work to that person that makes the decision not to go along with the narrative, and you're separated from your job. Then you're going to be put in a place where you have to make money for yourself, this is why I welcomely I accept the challenge. Obviously, they don't know much about Mo and who I come from, to say, you know, I'm not afraid of the challenge. So if you would like to read this next slide, and if you can see it, and then we just jump off from there about now that we're on our own, we've been cut off from the teat of corporate America, we have to hustle.
Sure. Yeah. So this slide says hustling is canceled. From now on, we are relaxing our nervous systems and getting into energetic alignment with the intended outcome. And this was a quote from someone I follow on Instagram. He goes by "Words Are Vibrations." Mm-hmm. And, you know, I will say, when I'm still working through your latest show with Adam, which I love so much. And when you announced that you'd been separated from your job, I was yelling, "Congratulations!" I was so excited for you, because now you get to create your path on your own terms. You're free.
And that's true. And the privilege that I've had is I've had a couple of years head start on diving into that venture. So it's not as chaotic. Now there is pressure, of course, when your earning potential is based solely off of the talents that you have outside of being hired by a job. There is pressure there. And that's why I chose this slide, because with that becomes this chaotic mindset, like, oh, I have to do everything. You know, I have 3 or 4. I mean, you got Converse, you got the show with me and Adam Curry, and the derivative of that is Lost Tapes, and then we have the lives. And then maintain the social media, and I have other ventures that I'm working to. This more of commerce than communication or entertainment. So I have all these things going, and this is why this slide resonated with me, because people think of hustling, it becomes chaotic. And when it becomes chaotic, you can't have a clean thought process. And I live my life by the 7 habits. And one of them is beginning with the end in mind. And with that chaos, you can't get a clear picture of what that ending looks like.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. And I think that again, that's part of the programming, is like, well, if you're not in the system, then you have to hustle, and you have to be on 24/7, and you have to be a shark, you know. And I've tried it that way because I'm definitely wired towards the more fiery. And what I'm learning through my path is that it can be relaxed. And I think we touched on this on the last show we did as well, in terms of working with the invisible forces in the multiverse, and, you know, just deciding that it's going to be easy and asking source for support. And I've noticed this as a coach and a consultant, that when I get into a little bit of a fear mindset of like, ooh, the money's not coming in, I don't have a lot of clients, I do two things. One is I give money away first and foremost. Like that's when I would donate to your show. Like when money feels tight for me, number one is give. So it starts to circulate. And then I just go into getting really clear on who my ideal client or clients are and calling them in. And it's crazy how that works. And I think a big piece of what's going on in terms of those of us who are either stepping out of the system or being kicked out of the system is it's pushing us to figure out a different way, which is more fun, kinder, and more magical.
Okay, well, you speak of magical. I want to get into this next slide. You can read this one, and then I want to know what you were trying to communicate or the information you were trying to transfer when you posted this post.
Okay. So this is I think it's pronounced Goethe quote. The soul that sees beauty may sometimes walk alone. And there's a theme. So for those in your audience who don't follow me, I've been posting a quote a day on Instagram for years and years and years and years and years. And the themes in my quotes are, autonomy, independence, sovereignty, empowerment, joy. So this one, I'm part of a spiritual community called the Gene Keys, which delineates each of the 64 DNA codons as a pathway to enlightenment. So I think when I posted this, I was really in a deep contemplation of beauty, which is the first gene key. But I mean, this is really a time, these past 2 years, for me personally, I've lost so many friends, so many colleagues, and I know a lot of us have, who are speaking our truths. And it's become, at times a very isolating path. And I think that, this quote was about the integrity in that path and the fact that so many who are clinging to herd mentality, from my perspective, are displaying so much ugliness and so much hatred and so much vitriol that I find it shocking. And it's interesting that I see those of us who aren't falling in line, in lockstep with the narrative, are those of us who continue to see beauty in the world, who can continue to, we walk through, where I live, we still have mask mandates, but I don't cover my face. My friends don't cover our face, so that we can smile at people and connect with people. And so, I'm devoted to seeing beauty, to being beauty, to radiating beauty. And a lot of times I feel alone in that path.
And what I took away from it is, it says the soul that sees beauty may sometimes walk alone. What I took away from it is the fact that sometimes you have to separate yourself from the masses standard of beauty to really truly understand what you find beautiful. Because a lot of times what we say is beautiful is just are aligning ourselves with what the masses say is beautiful. You might have an appetite or appreciation for something totally weird and by the masses standpoint, but secretly you enjoy. It might be a food or a picture or even a car. I like that kind of car, but I'll say I like this kind of car to get the approval of the masses. So that's what I took away from it. And with that said, I think it's the perfect time to go to the Facts Family questions. You guys go ahead and drop your questions in the live chat. And let me do this first before I get in trouble. Let me make sure I speak to the Facts Family, because I kind of, I'll do this in the intro next time, but just so excited to get the new format off. I want to make sure I speak to everybody. DMW, he was with us last night over at Grump's channel. Had a great conversation over there. Judy S, Michelle Garcia, John Taylor. Beautiful Facts Family. Scam Baiter X. We got Derek 405. Let me make sure I didn't miss anybody. Brian O. Mondi. I want to make sure I got and there go to brother Don Oliver Davis. If you're not following him, please go over to Worldview War Fighting. we have a show coming up on Tuesday, another Converse, and like I said, he's helped me with restructuring the format, and also he's a wonderful writer. So as well as with Dani Katz, I'm surprisingly I'm surrounding myself by writers. Thank you, Judy. She said she's so proud of my courage. I appreciate that, and I think I've spoken. Miguel, make sure I hit everybody. I think Sean M. And now let's go ahead and get to the questions that I flagged previously. Judy S says she's so proud of my courage. I flagged that one. Stephen Lynch said, when do we get to see your face, Mo? I am not hiding, but at the same time, I don't put myself out front for a couple of reasons. Maybe I need to explain this. Is that one, just the anonymity of my family. It's not fair to them that I make this decision and they kind of get pulled along with it. It's kind of like the effect of preacher kids. You know, oftentimes their father's or mother's decision weighs down heavy on them. So that's one reason. And then the other reason is I want you to appreciate my message and not form a cult of personality. So hopefully that's clear. Miguel says, I need to pay attention to everything and the truth reveal itself t-shirt. And all the merch makers out there, here's an opportunity. If you want to make MoFax t-shirts or, you know, sayings from MoFax or anything, if you want to make that merch and sell it, go for it. Because a lot of times, like people in hard times, MoFax is open source as far as putting it on t-shirt, coffee mugs, and making money for yourself. And if you do it, hopefully you will send some money my way as in the form of value, you know, just for, you know, putting the value out there. Sean M says, that's a good point. Every time I consciously try to save money, it seems more sacred. It's no scary, excuse me. When I give it, it seems to come back. You want to expound on that point, Sean M, while I go through, Sean M's point, Dani, while I go through some more of the questions?
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Definitely. And I just want to say, I love that you're open source and just granted your community your approval for making merch. That so warms my heart. So in terms of money, I mean, money is currency, right? So you think of a current, and a current is a flow. And, you know, I talk a lot about social programming and where, you know, the powers that were or the cultural engineers are trying to like trick us, enslave us, what have you. And what money is such a big realm for them. So we have a lot of program scarcity mentality around money where we're like, we hold it and we safeguard it and we're waiting for some crazy emergency. And the reality is that money is an energy. Abundance is an energy. You know, when I teach about it in my workshops, it's a frequency band in the quantum field. And money, like anything in a current, likes to move, likes to flow. So I find the more money I give, the more money I spend, the more comes back to me. It's when I create fear around money and am relating to money as though, you know, there's a scarcity of money, then that's what I create for myself.
And I'm glad you explained that. Let's go get to a couple more questions, and then we'll keep it moving, get back to the second segment, which I'm excited about. Radix, I hope I pronounced that right, says mass formation is ugly when it turns on you, and that's why we always got to be careful about the mass mindset, because it will turn on you. It's pretty much guaranteed that it will turn on you at some point. So that's why if we're winning with it now, you're going to end up losing with it eventually. So I appreciate that. We got Lindsay H, aka DC Girl, which she's been a supporter from the very beginning. She still wants me to come to a meetup. I'll have to see about that. She's given me several invitations, and she also says that she's there listening with Roger Roundy. And for people that don't know, he's the one that contributed the latest artwork for the MoFax with Adam Curry, as well as for the Lost Tape. So this is the value for value coming in multiple ways. If you, for people that's out of work or have time, if you could offer talent and time, that's just as valuable as, or even sometimes more valuable than money, because the level of professional artwork he provided to me, you know, if you had to put that in donation amount, it would be tremendous. So I appreciate that, Roger. I appreciate it very much. And then Radix said, if I'm Radix, I hope that's 023, said they swatted Tim Pool. Mo is only being prudent. And that's exactly right. And that wraps up our time for the Facts Family question. It also helps if you do at Mo Facts, if you have a pressing question. That will help me get to it. It's just easier. And we got one more question here. Just to get to the last one. It said, Dani Katz, how can we connect with people in real life with the mask? If you want to take that question.
Yeah, I mean, when I go out into the world, like, I'm very big on smiling and eye contact. You know, I was like that before this started happening, but it feels like, you know, I'm attuned to like the alchemy of the social fabric, and I can feel how much we need that. And I'm big on compliments. You know, I'm really generous with offering what I appreciate about people. So if it's like complimenting their shoes or complimenting, you know, or talking about something in their grocery basket, I really don't go to that many places because you know, my options are limited given the mandates, but I make a point of looking at always like, where can I speak to our shared humanity in this moment and make this person feel good?
And with that said, we'll go ahead and slide into the second block. If you want to read this on the screen now, that'll be great. And then you can read it as you wish and then chime in, or however you want to read the whole thing. I'll just leave it up to you. And then we'll talk about it, because I think this is the genesis of what the show is going to be about. So can you see the screen?
Yes, I can see it. Yeah.
Take it away.
Sure. So this is a quote from Mark Groves, and it reads, "If a truth burns down a relationship, a family, a community, or a society, it was only ever held together by lies. And to that I say, let it burn. I never want to live in a world where our need for quote unquote comfort supersedes our need to stand on a foundation only the truth can provide."
So this is the chance to be contrarian and say, well, isn't it better to have some relationship or some family or community better than none at all?
So I don't prescribe for others, because I think we all have our own priorities and values, and no one's are more correct than anyone else's. But for me, and I came in like this, truth and authenticity always superseded my need for connection or to be liked or to belong. So for me, that was never the case. And I've always been, of course I crave community, and I have beautiful friends, but my allegiance is always, always, always to the truth. And I don't really jive with codependent relationships where we can't speak freely, where we have to play specific roles to make others feel more comfortable. Like, that's just not what I came to this planet to do.
Okay. And so this leads us into the next. This is the post I saw. And if people want to go see it, let me go ahead and put the link in the live chat so people can see this. And you want to just give like maybe a 20-30 second summary of what you were saying, if you can remember. I know I caught you flat-footed, but this is the one when I hit you in your DM like, we got to talk. So I put that.
So this is, and I will say, like, I was a little nervous about this show, Mo, in the same way I was nervous about this post, because I rarely talk about my family life in my videos and my things. But the gist was basically giving people permission from my own experience to break up with their family and letting people know, it's just not a choice that's given a lot of credence or value in our culture. And when I made that choice, I was criticized heavily by a lot of people who were really close to me in my life. And I also work very closely with shamans and mystics and plant medicines. And so the gist of this post was the validation in I feel like my life didn't really truly start authentically until I broke up with my family. And that's when I was really able to get some traction in terms of self-esteem, in terms of self-empowerment. And that choice has been validated by, all of the mystics and shamans and medicines that I work with. And I've had people say that they wish that more people would make this choice. So I shared this to just let people in my community know, because I'm hearing so many people having so much conflict with their families. And I never lobby for people to break up with their families. It's a very big choice that we have to come to on our own. But it was just me sharing that for me, it was the best choice that I made.
And I appreciate your courage. And, and this is not to speak specifically about your situation, but the dynamics behind just a generic conversation that the timing of this show, we're coming off of the holidays. We're coming off of maybe people who have encountered some abuse verbally or just psychologically from dealing with their family over the holidays. And that feeling they may have to say, you know what? Is it really worth going to Christmas dinner, Thanksgiving dinner, taking that phone call, associating with, and not just with family, friends, coworkers, is it really worth dealing in that environment to hold this thing together? So I appreciate your courage, and like I said, this is the motivation for this show, because I try to have shows that help the Facts family, and I'm sure somebody's out here dealing with this from what people's told me behind the scenes and even in the live chat. I think the live chat we have here is one of the most honest, because people share things in a public space, and then the same way you did on Instagram. So I applaud you for that. And this just leads me to this article from Psychology Today, and it asks, can you divorce your family? And we're not going to get into more of the details of it, but we're just going to look over the 3 types of ways of separating from your family. And the first being marginalization. So let me make sure I post that link in there. You can go ahead and take off, like, being marginalized. When we say that, what comes to mind?
Are you asking me?
Yes.
I mean, I was always the black sheep. So I was the one who everyone would gang up upon, being marginalized. I mean, it's like being the, I'm just going to go with black sheep because I have a tendency to get myself in trouble with what I actually want to say right now.
Yeah, I mean, and I don't want the Katz family come after me. So, but no, it says here in the article, as it says, it's commonly referred to as black sheep of the family. Family marginalization is the chronic experience of being treated differently, feeling excluded, or being disapproved of by the rest of the family. So we can see how this goes hand in hand with the whole Vaseline situation, where you might be the black sheep of the family on that one topic. And so if anybody is dealing with marginalization, I hope this show helps you.
Cool.
So next, let's just go ahead and go to the next one. Is parent-child alienation. And it says here, parent-child alienation occurs when one parent persuades their child to disown the other parent. I don't know if that's your situation, but we've seen in cases like this where people use the Vaseline to get custody from the other parent. We've seen where the states come in and rendered on one side or the other based off the people's decision. And I don't want to make this exclusively about, the Vaseline and that kind of thing, but we're using it as a jumping off point to talk about it. So what harm, of course there's obvious harms, but I just want to get your opinion. What are the harms that stand out to you about parent-child alienation?
Yeah, I see this one a lot in my clients and in my friend group. This was not my own personal experience. I think it's really abusive, especially when we're dealing with children. I think it's abusive with adult children as well. But when we're talking about minors who are dependent upon their parents for survival, I think this is really traumatizing and abusive. And I have some friends, actually, and some clients who are in these situations. And I always encourage them to take responsibility for choosing to partner with these people, and they need to deal with that within themselves. And really, I'm not one to tell people what they should do, and I make marks with my fingers, but it is really not playing fair to bring one's children in between parental disagreements. I think that that's really cruel to the children.
And it doesn't always have to be the parent-child alienation. You'll see this where siblings will be leveraged against each other.
Totally.
To say, where the parent caters to the sibling that agrees with them, going back to the black sheeping. That's a known tactic for black sheeping, right? They appraise one child for their actions in hopes of alienating that sibling from their sibling. So go ahead. Just jump in where you feel like it.
I actually did have that experience where I had one parent who favored me over my brother and sister. And when that parent died, my brother and sister turned against me in a really creepy way. But I could also understand it in hindsight from, what they were experiencing. But yeah, it's a great way to screw up a family.
And it could be that 100%, the 180 degree of black sheeping or marginalization. What happens is the favorite child is not liked by either the spouse or the parent, or either not liked by the siblings, because they're like, oh, you're like the teacher pet effect, right? It's exactly. You're the teacher's pet. We don't like you. And then say 2 or 3 siblings that are not the favorite gang up on the sibling when, the favorite sibling when the parent's not around.
Exactly.
So, okay. So I just want to make sure we have, like I said, we're having these conversations more of when did you have to decide for yourself. And I keep hearing Dani say this. We're not making any recommendations to say, alienate yourself from your family or separate yourself from your family. But I will say this, you have to put your health first.
Yes. And
this is a good jumping off point. Maybe if you have this case where you and your siblings are being separated by your parent, it's time to have that honest conversation. Like, do you realize how her favoritism makes me feel? Because they see favoritism as a positive. Like, oh, your mom's favorite, your dad's favorite. And it's really a huge negative that I've seen in certain cases because of the alienation. You want to pick up from there?
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I completely agree. And I like your recommendation for just using it to open up a conversation, which I always recommend before ending any relationship. Try from all angles to work it out. And it's only when there's, for me, when it was irreconcilable, where I was like, all right, I love myself more.
And that's the point. You can't love anybody else until you love yourself completely. Exactly. I don't care. And that goes for parents. Even if you're in my situation, that of course I've like, what about the kids? What about the wife? What about this? What about society? How they think about me? And it's like, I couldn't live with myself if I made a decision that I wasn't 100% on board with. So you got to be careful of letting loved ones, either the unspoken expectations or even they might be in your head. Like, well, they expect this of me, and they're not even spoken, but you have to analyze that and say, you know what? Am I on board with this 100%? And if you're not, then it might be time for a conversation. And with that said, I want to go into the final form of just like family parting or separation, estrangement. And they said this occurs between parents and child when one party wants to limit interaction or completely end the relationship with the other party. Take it away.
This is where we're at, and it's this was ultimately what called me to step away in my big way, was like the push pull of like, okay, I'm not going to talk to you anymore, and I'm going to withdraw my love. And that was a pattern. And that was a pattern that I signed on to for the bulk of my life until I realized this is so abusive. And I realized like how it was just reinforcing this pattern of conditional love. And I was buying on to conditional love by like welcoming the family back in when I was forgiven or when they decided to talk to me. And I was like, no, I need to love myself unconditionally, which means I'm no longer willing to sign on to conditional love that's taken away from me all the time. And ultimately what did the trick was, because I'd stayed in the family dynamic thinking it's going to hurt them. It's going to break their hearts. And then I realized like I'm hurt constantly and my heart is constantly breaking and I'm not responsible for their pain. I'm responsible for my own. And I've been dropping the ball by not having my own back. And that was what gave me the courage to finally step away.
And I want to get your expert opinion on this. Could it be that you're not yours, but the person that feels like they're the victim is actually weaponizing the victimization to hold themselves hostage from their family, like not answering texts, not answering calls, not showing up to family functions, to say, oh, I'm not happy, so you're going to suffer. Can that be the case where actually the person that's the quote unquote offended is actually the aggressor?
Yes, I think that can be the case. And that's such a great question. And that's why, like I said, I tread this realm very carefully with my clients where I say, if you're separating from your family as like a screw you to punish them, that's the wrong reason. Okay. It has to be done with the most love and it has to be a loving thing for yourself. And yeah, I do see a lot of people, it's very, that's very childish and adolescent. Like, well, I'm not going to go and, I'll show them. And I think that's not really a very strong place from which to step away from one's family.
Okay, I'm glad you said that. So since we have you here, before we get into the second block of going back to the facts family, you all start dropping your questions in there so we can get to them. How would you open up that conversation? Say I'm ready, I'm on the cusp. I'm like, it's intervention time. If this doesn't work, then I'm willing to walk away cold turkey. How do you open that conversation in your expert opinion?
I would go to the relevant players and just say, look, this dynamic isn't working for me. Like, I'm not feeling safe. I don't feel like you guys have my back. And I feel like, for me personally, I feel like you're expecting me to play a role that isn't working for me. And I'm wondering if there's a way that we can't reconfigure this. Can we bring in some help? Can we bring in a therapist? Is there a willingness to work on this relationship? Because the way it is right now, it's not working for me. And I'm seriously considering stepping away, but I want to exhaust all possible options for resolution. Is there a willingness? There has to be that willingness from all of the players to take responsibility, to step into some uncomfortable conversations where we can see where our actions, our behaviors, and our words are hurting other people. If there's not that willingness, which was the case in my family, for me, I chose to step away. But I do think it's healthy to give everyone a chance to pivot.
And that mode of conversation, is that text, email?
No.
No, I'm what's the best mode of conversation that's feasible? Because we might have people that's across country, that kind of thing. What do you suggest?
Ideally, it's an in-person. Now, not everyone's going to be willing to do that. And some of us, for me personally, my family has a lot of rage. It's a very reactive family. Mm-hmm. That doesn't really work super well with my family, or it didn't back when we were in touch. So at least, an email that you don't send in anger, that you write and come back to the next day and maybe give it a few days to make sure that it's clean, to make sure that we're taking responsibility, to make sure that we're not communicating violently with blame or projection. But ideally, it would be to invite a real-time voice-to-voice conversation. Text is tough because so much nuance can be lost and so many assumptions can be made.
So when you say Zoom, okay, let's rank them. In person over Zoom, Zoom over phone call, and phone call over text.
Phone call over email, and email over text.
Because I'm the reason why I said Zoom is, even if you can get the voice and get the facial nonverbal cues. Shout out to Grump from the communication with that. So with that said, let's go ahead and get into the second block of the Facts Family questions. You guys, I'm going to go ahead and go to the ones I pointed out. Nice Fox said, don't need to see Mo's face. He's every man. I appreciate that. Theodora's in the house with always with the purple and gold hearts. Yeah, always. And that's, it's always good to see. Carolyn, I hope that's pronounced right. I love what Roger Rowney did with the art. It's so cool. And it is a beautiful piece. Excuse me. Steve Lynch says, fear is the mind killer. It is the little death. You want to touch on that right quick about fear?
I mean, I don't know specifically in what realm Steve is referring, but yeah, I mean, fear is what I talk about this in my pop propaganda book, and we can see it. You talk about this all the time. It's like all the fear mongering sends cortisol rushes through the bloodstream. It makes us easier to control. It puts us in a panic. We don't think clearly. Like, we don't have full access to our neurological functions when we're in fear. I mean, and I saw that from the early days of this op that we're living through now, of like the amount of fear that they're blasting through the screens is suppressing everyone's immune response. It's the exact opposite of what we would need if we were really in the situation they're trying to paint.
And did you see, and I found it interesting, that the nocebo effect has made its way into the public conversation. They're saying that the results of the Vaseline is, and negative impacts is a result of nocebo effect. Did you see that? Did you see that article?
No, but that's insane.
Right. Well, what you would think like that would work both ways, but it's amazing how these spellcasters, I just wanted to point that out for people that haven't seen it. I don't have the article right offhand, but if you just go type in nocebo effect and Vaseline, and you'll find it. It was even in the New York Post, I want to say. Wow. I think I posted it on one of my social media accounts. So we were talking about that, over a year ago? The nocebo effect. I think that was episode 32. Don't hold me to that. I'm terrible with remember the numbers of the shows, but this is a perfect example of what I say about the Facts family and the live chat sharing. Miguel says, not seeing my kids had been extremely hard on me. I contemplated ending it all after a few years, and it's extremely difficult when Black, because we're told to man up. I agree with him that the second part, we're told to man up. And I want to say this for men that made the same decision I made. It's some dark areas there. You can go into some dark spaces. So my recommendation is stay busy so your mind doesn't have time to go through that horror loop. You want to comment on that, Dani?
Yeah, I do want to comment on that. I think the other piece is, and granted, we all have our own worldviews and cosmologies, but I'm a big believer in personal responsibility and karma. So trusting that if the way it's playing out is that, I'm separate from my family, then on some dimension, we all signed up for this. And this is exactly what our souls need for our own paths. So I would say, it doesn't take the pain out of it at all. But for Miguel, just trusting that this is exactly what your kids signed up for, and this is exactly what they need to do what they came here to do.
And I, first of all, I want to thank Miguel for sharing, because it's the courage that it took to share that.
Yeah.
I want to appreciate you very much for doing that, because you just broached a very important topic. Because men in general, doing this whole thing that we're commonly we're the breadwinner of the family. We're told just to suck it up and take it. Just suck it up and take the jab. What, you're going to go out here and make a decision that's going to impact your family? I mean, these are some of the things I heard. Like, it's like I have concerns, and people just like, but you got a family to take care of. But it's like, I have concerns. But, thank you, Miguel, for bringing that up. Jack State says, does family have to have your back? I don't know what context you were asking that, Jack, but I just want to acknowledge that we did see your question. Nice Fox says, MoFax, has Dani experienced any improved relationships with certain fam members after distancing herself from unhealthy members. And you're not obligated to answer these questions about your personal situation, but that's up to you.
Yeah, I'm happy to answer. And it actually has. The first relationship that I walked away from was my brother, probably 29 years ago. And it wasn't until after I had stepped away from every single other relationship in my family, we got back in touch probably 4 years ago. And it's very gentle. It's just some texts and some phone calls. But because of what we've both been through and what we both understand, that like now there's just a devotion to being kind and being loving and just supporting one another from a distance. So it was the one relationship that I didn't think I would ever get any healing on. And I think it was specifically the choice to step away. And he made it the same choice as well, that is giving both of us some healing and a little bit of contact.
Okay. So I appreciate you honestly, I appreciate you being transparent and candid with us about your personal situation. There's no obligation, of course, but it's very helpful that you decided to share with us. I want to speak to Kai Brown. I think I missed her. How you doing, Kai? And then Sophisticated, he says it's very toxic to say that, and Jack State says say what? I think he's talking about man up. This is a very toxic because what it does, it puts you in a weird spot between your masculinity, your ability to provide, and doing something that's harmful or you consider harmful to yourself. So, Dani, you want to speak to that before we exit?
No, I want to second that. I mean, for as long, I'm Gen X, so as long as I've been alive, I have seen men in our culture get a really bad rap. From when I was a kid, there were, my mom had a bumper sticker in her car that said, "A woman needs a man like a fish needs a bicycle." And even as a child, I thought, boys are seeing this. Like, this is so not cool. So I agree that phrase, it has been weaponized, and I really look forward to men being lauded and lifted up in our culture sooner than later.
And the weird part about it is the response to a Sophisticated statement would be, you really need to man up. If you were to say, that's toxic what you just said to me, to say man up. If you were to say that, then that would even double down on telling you to man up. So great questions. We're going to exit the second question block and go into the final block between me and Dani. And I have this video, Dani, if we want to go through it. Cool. And this is from the OWN network, Oprah. And what I want to do is I'm going to play it. You tell me when to stop. And this is their advice. 5 pieces of advice for dealing with toxic people. I want to hear if you agree, disagree, and you just stop me when you want to stop. Okay.
Okay.
You willing to play along?
Okay.
Okay. All right. And people at home, please play along as well. So we're going to get into this video now. Fair use.
I think it's really important in any relationship that you ask yourself this question: what is my cost for being in this relationship? Because there's a cost.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, so I want to start with the title. I think to label people toxic is already a bad move. Some people might be communicating with toxicity or relating toxically, but I think to label people toxic people is a really dehumanizing move from the get-go.
Okay, so you're saying that in itself is a weaponization of a word.
Completely, because you're putting people who still have trauma to heal or still have issues to flush out, you're putting them in a box, in a cage called toxic people, which is going to make it very hard for them to get out of when they have done their own healing. So that in itself is marginalizing people who are, we're all on a healing path. We might not get it this lifetime, but we're more likely to when we hold people to that potential. When we label them toxic people, we eradicate that possibility for them.
Okay. And just so, since we're stopped here, it says, number 1, ask yourself, what is my cost for being in this relationship? Do you agree with that? Is that a good place to start? or no, yes, no, maybe
I
so.
do. I think it is. I think it's good to see, like, to have like a cost benefit ratio, especially when we're dealing with these, big relationships like our family. Is it costing me more than it's giving me? And is that consistent over the long haul? So yes, I agree with this one.
And I would warn people, don't undervalue the need for family, because when you're angry and you're acting out of anger, you're like, I never want to speak to that person again. Make sure you value family appropriately. I can't tell you how to do it, but make sure you do that. And when you're doing this calculation of if it's time to walk away or not.
Totally. I totally.
You want ready to continue on?
Yes, ready.
All right, here we go.
In every relationship you're in, there's a cost. And you have to ask yourself, what is the cost of being in there? If the cost is you have to lose yourself, you can't be who you are, do what you do, you can't be the person you are because you must conform to them in order to coexist peacefully, the cost is you. If the cost is you have to work at it, that's okay. The cost is you have to make some sacrifices, that's okay. But ask yourself in every relationship you're in, what's the cost for being in this relationship? And you'll see real quick whether it's worth the price or whether it's not.
All right, you want to say anything before we continue on to the second piece of advice?
I'm on board thus far.
You give do you give Dr. Phil a check?
I did.
Okay, all right. So Dr. Phil, you're good. You're good with Dani Katz, Dr. Phil. I know you're watching. All right, here's the second one.
You got to have a good, strong, solid no muscle that you can stand in, and you got to have a yes muscle. You got to say no to the things that don't honor you, no to the things that don't bring you joy, no to the things that don't bring you peace, and you don't have to explain your no. You got to have 101 different ways to say no.
All right,
Yes.
take it away. Here's your chance.
Yes. I totally agree. Being able to have a strong no is so important. And I a lot of times talk about the no's that lead to the bigger yeses. So the more clear we are on what we value, where we're going, what we're creating, the easier it is to say no to all the things that aren't getting us there. I think no's are very loving and very important skill to master.
And I would like to answer this. I would like to add to what Dani said, is I'll never feel obligated to answer on the spot or obligate somebody else to answer on the spot. If you make a request of a person and people that know that deal with me, they'll know if I ask them to do something, I'm like, hold on, you don't have to answer now. Because I want a person to be able to fully process my request, take it, think about it, and then come back with me with a more thoughtful answer than to say, hey, ask. And I'll say, let me add this to it. A lot of times people will ambush you at the wrong time to ask, either knowingly or unknowingly. They'll say, your person's headed out the door, and then you start up a conversation and they're time bound. And it's like they'll give you a quick answer just to stop the conversation. You want to chime in on that?
Yeah, I agree. And I really appreciate the caveat to not feel pressured to commit in the moment, especially when we're not clear. And, to just say like, I'm not sure yet. Let me get back to you on that. And not feel, a lot of times we feel like because we can do something that's a yes. But just because we can doesn't mean that we really want to, or that it's the most aligned choice. So I agree, like be willing to take pause and to give other people time to come to their true answer.
Okay, so we're continuing on. Okay.
Yep.
So far so good. They're 1.5 and for 1.5 because we haven't heard the rest of her the second part of this second piece of advice.
You matter, and your no matters.
Let me say this: fair use, you two, fair use.
And don't back up on your no. Don't draw your line in the sand, and when somebody crosses it, you back up and draw another line. No, stand on your line. Stand for your no.
How do you forgive a
And I'm standing on my line, and I'm standing on my no. And trust me, I don't know for the believers out there, because I consider myself a believer, that I was in the Garden of Gethsemane, for people who don't know, before Christ was about to be executed. he kept going back to the garden and praying like, if it's not for cup's not for me, you know what I'm saying, take it away from me. I was in that same mode of like, if there's any way out of this situation, because this is going to be a really hard decision. It wasn't a hard decision to make. It was a harder decision for people to understand outside of me. Yeah.
Yeah. And that makes it harder. You know your truth, but that, you know, the pressure of our loved ones and the people in our lives, that, you know, that's just another level of standing in that truth.
Thank you all. So let's go ahead and get to number 3.
Family member that you have to be in constant contact with, and though you forgive,
fair use.
the offense continues to happen. How do you manage that?
I think, first of all, in all that get an understanding. You cannot forgive what you don't understand. Understanding what makes people do what they do, it doesn't excuse them, it doesn't exonerate them, but it is so much easier to cope with a family member when you understand this is an addiction, this is an alcoholic behavior, you are broken in some way. So I can't expect a radio that's broken to play like a radio that's not broken. Once you understand that, you adjust your expectations to deliverables on the level of the person's capacity. Everybody doesn't have the same capacity. And when you expect somebody to love on a gallon level and they are a pint person, you're going to be frustrated the rest of your life.
Take it away, Dani.
Yeah, I think he left out a step, which is if it doesn't work for you to be loved on a pint level, you have every right to walk away. I agree. I think it's helpful to an extent with everyone in our lives to understand where they're coming from and to understand their limitations and, you know, their shadows and as well as our own. But I also think it's okay when other people's limitations don't work for us, we can walk away.
And that's the thing. I want to say this. Becoming a parent, I gave my parents a lot more credit. Because you don't understand what it's like to be a parent until you become one, and it opens up your mind like, oh my God, do my kids think that way about me when I gotta make a decision that they don't agree with? So I'll say that to say this: if it's a pint person, just accept them for being a pint person, and accept what the kind of love that they can give. People are not gonna be elevated and on your level of understanding. People are not a perfect example, going back to the 7 habits again. Just because I seek first to understand, I can't expect that of other people. Now it's nice if they do that, but I won't write a person off if they don't. Now what I would do is limit my interaction with them maybe to a certain level. I mean, you can have just general conversation or very surface level interactions, but trying to go to that next level, if they can't go there, it's not useful to try to push them there.
Yeah, I totally agree.
All right, so I guess what's that, 3 for 3?
I give this is like a half because
2.5. Okay, 2.5 for 3. Not doing bad for Oprah and her crew, her coven. So, all right, let's continue on.
Ooh, I love that. That is good. Basically, what you're saying is if you got haters around you, in your family or not, you got to get them out of your wagon.
Have you ever taken an idea to a person, or no matter what you take to them, it's not a good idea?
Right.
It's just something wrong. You know, when I share an idea with you, and you don't show me how to make that idea work, all your conversation is why it won't work,
yeah.
I immediately end that conversation. I'm not interested in why it won't work. That's going to arise on the journey. I just need to know, can you feel what I'm saying? Are you on board with it? Do you have a suggestion how to make it work? The moment I hear, well, I don't think that'll work. Okay, cool, thank you.
I'm gonna stop it right there.
Yeah, I agree. And I really like that perspective. And I think it comes down to, the way that I would phrase it is, do I like the reflection that I'm seeing of myself in this person's eyes? We don't have to be on the same page at all times, but I have people in my life who, even if they don't get me, they're rooting for me and there's some sort of approval. But if that, in terms of his phrasing on haters or people who aren't down with your ideas, if the constant reflection is like, not enough, terrible, you suck, you're a weirdo, at some point I'm just going to separate myself from that reflection, from that person. And again, like, we all have different priorities. So for some people, family is a higher priority than our mission and creating big things in the world out of nothing. But for those of us who are here to create things out of nothing, that's hard enough. And when you have people in your life who are saying you suck and you can't do this and that's a terrible idea, then at some point you're like, either I'm going to give my allegiance to the people who tell me I suck and not do what I came here to do, or I'm going to take that energy and that feedback out of my life so that I can do what I came here to do.
So I'm going to reverse it 180. How do you become aware if you're that person that's negative? What exercise can you do to become aware if you're the the person that's always shooting other people's dreams down?
That's a great question. And I think it would come down to like, how do we feel about our interactions with people when we leave? And also, I can sense when I'm having a conversation with someone when I've said something that hurts their feelings or that deflated them. I'm aware of that. So it's checking in to see, how are people receiving me? And how are people, what feelings am I leaving people with when they leave our time together or our conversations? And do I feel good about that? And if not, then maybe we need to look at ourselves and make some shifts.
And just going back to the man topic before we move on to the final piece of advice is sometimes men just need a cheerleader.
100% of the time, men need a cheerleader. I wrote an article about this for Los Angeles Magazine, and they killed it because they said that it came off as critical of the Me Too movement. And I'm prepping to do a video on this, but I say this all the time. The number one thing that the men in our lives need is our approval. And when we give our approval to our men first, and not just our partners, our brothers, our friends, our colleagues, when we give that to men first, men will step up to the plate. And when we withhold that, which is, a current cultural trend that I'm really excited to change, that works against men and it works against women. We have to give men our approval and our confidence in them first. That's on women to do first.
I appreciate that, and I look forward to that article. All right, and you know what? If nothing else, you should post that somewhere.
You're right.
That's the message that needs to be heard, because oftentimes that's the strength we draw from our mate, is the belief in us. Like, for example, my daughter, I was like, she's 18 now. And I was like, and we were talking about the situation, and she's like, I understand, Dad, your situation. And I said, are you nervous? She said, nah, you're my dad, so I know you're going to figure something out. And her saying that, and it was unprompted, I didn't, try to prompt her to say that. That just confirmed it. Like, now I got to do it. You know what I'm saying? Like, as far as I got to make this work, not, to leave the job, but it's like, I have to make this work because my child has this supreme belief in me. And, it just kind of reinvigorated and moved any doubt out of the way. So we may seem like hard and callous beings, but we need that love, support, and cheerleader. So you want to get into that last piece of advice now?
The last piece
of advice from dealing with toxic people. There's one more piece of advice they have.
Yes, let's go to the last one.
So we're at 3.5 out of 4. They're not doing too bad.
Okay.
All right, here's the last piece of advice.
And I'm gone.
One of the things that Maya Angelou used to always say to me, and I love this, I actually said it at her memorial service. She used to say to me, because in the beginning, it used to bother me so much when people would talk about the haters. And she used to say to me, baby, those people can't hold a candle to the light that God already has shining on your face.
Yeah.
Can't you see the light that God has shining on your face? I learned to focus on the light that God has shining on my face and not worry about the people who trying to put up a candle and burn it.
All right, so I'm going to go back so you can read on the screen that last piece of advice. It says, focus on your brightness. Focus on the brightness of your own light. What's your say on that?
I agree with Oprah to an extent, but
Mm-hmm.
for me personally, like I would say the biggest, one of the biggest lessons that I've had to learn in this lifetime is self-esteem. That's not something that came naturally to me. So I have a zero tolerance policy for haters. I don't waste time hating on them back. I give them all love, but they're not allowed to be in my life. I only keep people in my life who are rooting for me.
Mm-hmm.
And who are respectful in that. Like I don't have tolerance for gossipers. I don't have tolerance for trash talk, because it's degrading on subtle energetic levels. So, with my family per se, even if I wasn't present to the trash talk, I'm very sensitive and very empathic. I can feel it. And for just me personally and the way I'm wired, haters are not allowed in my life.
Okay, so we're moving into the final segment of Facts Family Questions, and I'm going to lead it off as a question for you. Is it harmful to let your haters fuel you? You hear this all the time, like, oh, I let my haters fuel me. You'll hear like it's common in athletics and sports that when a guy's not drafted at a certain position, he puts that chip on his shoulder to prove everybody, wrong. Is that harmful?
Again, I think it depends on like what we're here for and what kind of lives we want to live. So, like I was an athlete, I was a competitive gymnast, and I performed well when I was angry. So there was a lot of abuse that would come from my coach in that realm because he knew that would make me win. So if you're in a phase of your life where winning the championship is more important than, like a regulated nervous system or a healthy psycho-emotional state, that could be a fine experience, but I don't think it's very sustainable. And I know a lot of high achievers fuel themselves off of hate. And I think that's fine if being a high achiever is the path that we're choosing. For me personally, where I'm at now, like I'm more interested in inner peace, in balance, in having healthy relationships and a healthy nervous system. So for where I'm at now, that type of fuel wouldn't serve me. But in different phases of my life where winning was a priority or certain realms of success, I do see that as something that can help people get there. But is it sustainable for a long-term, like happy, healthy life in terms of the way that I'm looking at the world now? I don't think so.
So just to make sure I understand, you're saying that you definitely can use it for fuel, but in the long term, it'll damage your engine.
Exactly. I think it will. And I also think, it keeps us in a polarity wherein those who are hating on us are still part of our story, right? And they're still part of our paradigm. I think ultimately, in terms of the health of the engine, to use our metaphor, we don't want to be in reaction to anything. We want to be sovereign and driving our ship, the way that we want to drive it, regardless of what's happening in terms of oppositional forces or those who aren't into us. I do see where it works, but I think it still keeps us in relationship with oppositional forces, which ultimately is degrading on our ultimate health and happiness.
And if you convert with your engine running off of that kind of fuel, when that fuel runs out,
exactly,
how do you still maintain and sustain?
Yeah, exactly. Like if you're on a sports team and you're fueling yourself off of, the crowd screaming against you, what happens when they're not there? Where do you pull it from at that point?
All right. So now getting to the last set of questions from the Fats family, we have Nice Fox. She says, Mo Facts, thanks Dani for sharing that. Trying to understand more about my ex's world. Her situation sounds similar to things I've heard her express. So what's a good way of understanding people? What would be like the number one rule for understanding people? Because I say seek first to understand, but I really don't give people the mechanics of how to understand. So if you could fill in that blank for us.
Yeah, I think one, being genuinely curious about how people come to their perspectives or opinions, and also always looking for the shared humanity. Like, where is the Venn diagram of crossover where I can relate to this person and understand this person, instead of focusing on where we're different and what we don't like. Are you still there, Mo?
Hello? Oh, sorry about that. I was muted. Let me go back.
Good.
Yeah, that's my bad. I was just talking my head off. Sean M says name calling is a personal attack and diverts focus from conversation. So I would say that's pretty self-explanatory, and I think you agree. Go ahead.
I do agree, but I do want to say something about this in terms of like your larger body of work, my larger body of work. We learn this as toddlers, not to name call. And yet we see in like the larger cultural conversation happening how easy people are diverting to low vibe name calling, which is so odd to me. Like, didn't we learn this in kindergarten?
And it's on both sides, right? Because you get the snowflake, you get and we have to, I'll say this. If you see someone on your side, and we don't do the binary, but if you see somebody participating in that behavior, I think it's easier to call them out than to try to get someone to understand from the other side.
Totally. And I would encourage us to all do it. And I also agree, like, we're speaking shorthand because I don't think there are sides, and the illusion of sides is a big part of the issue because it's humanity and the oligarchs. Really, truly. But I agree. And I would encourage everyone listening, when we hear people who share our same belief structure, calling people who don't names, call them in on it, call them to a higher frequency of relating.
Yeah, because one a case example of this, and we're going to get through the last of this question, is the pure blood versus, what is the opposite of that? Is that tainted blood? I mean, like, when you say these things, the inverse may not be stated, but it's implied.
100%. In every polarity, the inverse is invoked. And I was invited to speak actually this weekend at a pure blood conference, and I was honored, of course, but the name itself felt very divisive.
And you once again, you're the wordsmith expert, so we can be more creative to say pro-choice. That way we don't you may alienate somebody by saying pure blood because they were coerced to take the vax, but they're on your side. But when you use terms like pure blood, it may push them away and make them alienated, and may even radicalize them, to a point. So Sean M said this is key. Oftentimes I need to process things. I'm going to move on just for sake of time. Kyle Brown says, like, when people say when they've heard exactly what you said. We've all experienced this. I would say careful, because a lot of times people say just so their brain could think for the appropriate thing to say. You want to chime in on that, Dani?
Yeah, if I'm understanding Kai correctly as well, it's just more like, let me take a second, let me take that in. Like, let me chew on that a little bit.
But it also could be a weapon for gaslighting.
Oh, completely.
So we can see it both ways. I'm just saying, give a person a little leeway when you hear that, just so you can understand how they're using that mechanism, because it definitely could be toxic, in a way as well. So moving to Derek Birch, he says, Adam, how are you doing? Mo fired. Crazy intro to last show. and I couldn't answer that question in any other kind of way. And to be honest, and I go back and forth with saying separated, from my company, that kind of thing. But I was fired. I mean, it is what it is. And I don't, let that weigh on me negatively, but I'm not going to sugarcoat it as well.
Right.
Moving on, Scam Baiter says, Mo facts. I was just thinking maybe your now former place of employment would like to have a party with their fellow pro-vaxxers, the letters being B, L, and M. I appreciate that, Scammer. We had Don weigh in. He said we're making good points. Sean M says the majority of the younger men I've met are starving for anyone to encourage them, and it doesn't take a lot. They need to feel like someone believes in them. This may be another show we need to have. Please send me that article, because once again, like, it's always something you say that inspires another line of thought, and I think that would make him saying if you'd be gracious enough to come back, because of course you have an open invitation. I think that would be a great conversation because it seemed to spark a lot of commentary in the chat. Hello? I think she got muted. Hello? I think she got muted. I'll keep going. Yeah, Dani?
Hear me now?
Yeah, I think you got muted somehow.
Okay, sorry about that. Thank you. And I would love to come back and have that conversation. I actually think it's one of the most important conversations that we can have. And I'm really, I just think it's urgent that women shift the way they've been handling this Me Too op. And it's really time for us to step in to support and encourage our men. So I would love to have that conversation with you.
Because you can't have a nation without men.
No.
It's like you can't have a nation without women.
We live in a universe comprised of equal and opposite forces. So if men are out of balance, then so are women. And we really need to talk about that and take responsibility for that. And we have to work this out together.
Yep. And TD says, I think having exercises on mindfulness can help. Meditation, calming, and is one's negative related to jealousy, avarice, hubris, pretender, inauthenticity. You want to just touch on maybe some of those points about jealousy or hubris?
I do agree. And I think mindfulness practices are really important because, if it's meditation or breathing exercises or whatnot, it teaches us to pause when we're triggered. It teaches us to pause and look at, where am I responsible? Like, where am I lashing out of jealousy, or, out of inauthenticity? So it is some sort of practice that allows us to slow down so that we can reflect on our own responsibility in any situation. Is going to be helpful.
And Kai Brown, she disagreed with Sean M on his statement about boys and said girls as well. Of course, all children need to be loved. I think the point of specifically talking about boys is because in this society, we have black girl magic. We have girls rock, girls rule, that kind of thing. Totally. And it's, when you do that, it's like elevating. It's in a weird way, elevating girls over boys. So I think
protected class.
Yes. So they both go ahead.
It's disempowering to girls and women. I don't need anyone to throw me their stupid bones. Mm-hmm. And it's horrible for men and boys. I was teaching a propaganda homeschool class last fall, and I was asking the children to reflect on an experience of being, labeled or name called. And a 13-year-old boy was giving his experience of being uninvited from a birthday party because he was an anti-vaxxer and all the names he was called. And then he said, but I know I don't have a right to say anything because I'm a privileged white boy. And it totally broke my heart that this 13-year-old was under the illusion that he didn't have a right to his own authentic experience because he has a penis. That's insane. That's abusive.
Yeah, like I said, we definitely please send me that article because this is gonna be an awesome show when we get together again. And Scam Bader, I knew you were joking. I know you don't condone burning, looting, or mugging. It's understood. So I guess we go ahead and we can wrap up with the last 5 minutes just of the outro. I want to go back and make sure people can find you.
Thank you. So
here's her website once again. Let me make sure I get the link for that and put it in the live chat. That way people can definitely find you. Any takeaways that we should walk away with? Anything, one thing or a couple of things that we need to learn from this conversation that we had?
I mean, I feel like you and I fleshed it out pretty well. There are just so many places that we touched on. I think it's just for people to know that if they've exhausted all options and their family situation isn't working for them, to just, from my experience, it's been a very positive thing. Again, done with love, not as a way to punish the family, not with any anger or hatred, just with an understanding that this is what's best for me and for, on some higher dimension, all of us, for people to know that it's an option.
And can you say that one more time? Because I don't want this conversation to be misconstrued to say, oh, I just hold myself hostage from my family until they come around. So please just drill that point home, because I don't want that to ever be misconstrued.
Yeah, that stepping away from our family is a loving act. It is an act of self-love, and it's it's loving for my family. It's allowed me to let go of a lot of the resentment and ill will that I was harboring, because it's not like I did it in a cavalier way. I still do quite a bit of work with my ancestors, but it's not something done in anger, and it's not something done to punish anyone. It's really just a self-loving choice.
So what you're saying is it's for the betterment of self and not to the detriment of others.
Exactly. And when I was stepping away from the family and communicating that to them, and it wasn't easy, but all my communications were as loving as possible, with me taking full responsibility of I'm not in a place where I can be in this dynamic and be my highest self, and hold myself in a grounded, stable place. I look forward to doing enough work that I can be that, but I'm not there yet, so the whole thing was me taking responsibility for the fact that I'm not able to hold myself in this dynamic. There was no blame, there was no shame, and there was no ill will.
That's Dani Katz, y'all. Thank you, Dani, for coming by, having a conversation with me. Just remind people once again where they can find you, what you got coming up next, that kind of stuff. And the websites and her link bio is in the live chat for the people that's listening back. Just click on the live chat. You can find all her information there. Just remind us where we can find you next and what you got going on.
You can find me DaniKatz.com, quantumlanguaging.com, on Instagram, something.Dani. You can find all of my books on Amazon. If you are not aligned with buying books from the Amazon platform, respect, and message me privately and I'll arrange, for a private sale. Right now I'm working on a new book and I'm prepping for my next homeschool class. So the best way to play with me, I do private coaching one-on-one, and I also have a group coaching salon on Saturdays. And you can find information on all of that on my quantumlanguaging.com website.
I thank you once again, Dani, and I'm going to wrap up here with the Facts family. And this is what I like to see. It says, if this is the quality of content Mo is going to provide with his primary focus, success is assured. I appreciate that. And that's exactly what it's going to be. This is only the beginning. We're going to tighten up on all the products. I look at them as products separately. We're going to be tightening up on the quality of them, bringing in the time and talent of Facts family and producers. And just remind you, this is a value for value platform and production. So, and we're going to need your value even more now, just due to the recent, occurrences. Thank you again, once again, Dani, and you have a blessed night. And as I always say, pay attention to everything and the truth will reveal itself. Y'all have a good night.
2, 3. Elevate your mind. Elevate your mind. Elevate your mind. Elevate your mind. You can do it, you can do it, you can do it, you can do it, you can be it, you can be it, you can be it. You can do it, you can do it, you can do it, you can do it, you can be it, you can be it, you can be it. Elevate your mind. Elevate your mind. when I told myself I'ma do this one day. Held on to my dreams really tight and never let them escape.